Lee Berquist, reporter for the Journal Sentinel.
This afternoon, after the luncheon meeting with reporters, you said that that there are issues on finance and the economy that, frankly, Tommy Thompson would have a hard time understanding. And I'm wondering if you can elaborate on that. And if I could just add, isn't a statement like that fairly patronizing for someone who was the governor of the state for 14 years, health secretary for 4 years, and spent 5 years on corporate boards and running companies?
Sure. What I was talking about specifically was our global capital markets. The problem that we have today is so many of the issues have become so overly opaque, complicated, and it has driven issues from, and they come out of the global capital markets, be it you know, Wall Street or the globe as a whole. And if you look at it, if you go to the root cause of something like the internet bubble, or you go to the housing bubble, or you go to the brief commodity bubble that we had after, at the end of the housing bubble, or now the government spending bubble, so many of these issues, people in Washington have no clue what they're talking about. I'll give you a prime example of it. And by the way, Lee, I don't think Governor Thompson could sit here and talk about these issues. All right? I'm going to be very clear. I'm not going to back down on what I've said. I will, and in fact, I'd be glad to have him sit in any room and talk about things like the credit default swap market, talk about the CDOs structured. Now, people may say, oh, what's the big thing about that? The credit default swap market was a $54 trillion notional value market. It is the single biggest reason why we put $187 billion into AIG. We're buying out counterparty contracts from Goldman Sachs, SocGen, companies all over the world at 100 cents on the dollar when those contracts were trading at 30 to 40 cents on the dollar. People don't understand that the bailout that I've been against, they all think it's TARP. TARP was a small fraction of the bailouts that occurred. Yeah, I could run through a whole litany of programs, the TSLF, the TGLP, the PPIP, on and on and on. Backdoor mechanism that the Federal Reserve and that the Treasury used to prop up the financial system. Now, you know, I have a big problem with that because they're doing it in an opaque manner. And secondly, there's no consequences for the executives of those firms. So, you know, we can take the housing bubble and the issues that occurred during that. We can go back to the internet bubble. For me, who's spent my life in the global financial markets, I could see what was happening in the internet bubble. I could see how they threw away their underwriting guidebooks of having to have a company be in formation for more than 5 years. You see, back in the Great Depression, one of the causes of the Great Depression was the fact that they were taking companies public that really were shells, were jokes. They were selling stocks, and it was a huge fraud on the American public. People were buying stock in some company that there was really no viability to. So after the Great Depression, what happened is an underwriting guidebook got put in place for Wall Street, and certain conditions had to be met for these companies, for the investment banking community to take these companies public. Unfortunately, during the height of the internet bubble, all these sins came back in place. So they threw away their underwriting guidebook. So no longer did a company have to be in existence for 5 years. No longer did it have to be profitable for 3 years. And I could just go on with the litany of things. Because what they were doing was they were not only making a killing on taking the company private, but what they were doing is injecting capital into the company shortly before they took it public, excuse me, and running up the valuation and laying it off on a bunch of unsophisticated investors. So yes, I don't believe, because I've experienced it firsthand, that most career politicians have a clear understanding of what's driving so many of our economic problems. And I would include Governor Thompson in that equation. And I would love for Governor Thompson to meet me, sit down, any place, anytime, and have this debate with all of you around us.
Just a follow-up.
And it's not, and Lee, it's not mean to be demeaning in one iota to Governor Thompson. I respect him as an individual. I respect what he's done. But, you know, it is time, instead of having speeches of what I did 20 years ago, and to come out and say, or saying, I'm the one who's leading the polls, and come and talk what he plans to do for the country. The U.S. Senate seat is not an entitlement.